Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and very happy to be changing the channel on the Conservative speeches that the House has been stuck with for the last 2 months. So for the benefit of my constituents in the Great Riding Couch and Malahat Langford, Mr. Speaker, the House of Commons has been held up since the end of September because of an ongoing argument over a House order to produce documents from Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Now that order was provided for by the House back in June, and of course because the government hasn't complied with that, we are faced with a motion of privilege. And so for constituents to understand, basically a privilege motion is brought forward by any member who feels that their personal rights as an MP of this House or that the rights of the House as a collectivity have been breached, and in this case it was brought forward by the Conservatives. At the heart, it's a very simple. The original motion that we're dealing with, and I'll read it out to the record, Mr. Speaker, is, quote, that the government's failure of fully providing documents as ordered by the House on June 10th, 2024, be hereby referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Now, the Conservatives throughout the last couple of months have been putting forward different variations of sub-amendments to that amendment, but I will just stick with debate on the amendment because I think that is an order, it's language that people can clearly understand. On the face of it, it seems simple enough. The unfortunate thing is, though, Mr. Speaker, is that neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives have found a way out of the mess that we're currently in. And because both of these parties have abdicated their responsibility and are basically stuck in a playground fight with one another, right, all business of the House of Commons has come to a complete standstill. Right. And that is a problem. It costs a lot of money, Mr. Speaker, to run this place each and every day. We not only have the sitting members of Parliament who are collecting their salaries, but we also have an extensive House of Commons administration which is here to make sure that this place runs as smoothly as possible. And I think Canadians would be quite full of regret if they were to see how their taxpayer dollars are being wasted in this frivolous debate that has been going on for over 2 months now. We have incredibly important bills and business of the House that could have been discussed, but instead, day after day after day, we're just treated to a litany of Conservative MPs who keep on talking about the same old thing. Now, I will say for the record, Mr. Speaker, that I do firmly believe that the House absolutely has a constitutionally protected right to send for persons and papers. When the House makes an order, this is an important function of Parliament, when the House makes an order to send for papers, and those papers could be documents of any kind, they could be physical copies, electronic copies, really the only limit is that they need to exist, and they need to exist within Canada. That is an unfettered right, and it has been upheld by Parliamentary Law Council in rulings again and again. And not only you, Mr. Speaker, but previous occupants of that chair have reaffirmed that that right exists. So from the outset, I want to state clearly that I do agree with the main thrust of what we're trying to achieve here is that the House wants to see all of those documents in their unredacted form. However, we are at an obvious impasse. The government is unwilling to budge, and the Conservatives are unwilling to stand down, and as a result, we are not going anywhere in this House. And as a result, important issues in foreign affairs, in our economic policy, health policy, all of the things that Canadians elected us as MPs to come here and deliberate on their behalf are not getting done. In fact, the only recourse that we have as members of Parliament right now is to bring up the occasional concurrence debate in a committee report that has already been tabled. It's not much of a debate because, of course, those committees have already, by majority vote, agreed to those reports. They have been duly tabled, and so we are left with the only option of spending 3 hours here, 3 hours there, debating a report that has already been deliberated in thoroughness at its respective committee. But again, because that is the only avenue that we have available to us, that is the only way that we have been able to bring forward important subjects on foreign affairs, on health, on economic policy, and again, what Canadians are expecting us to do. So because we're at an impasse, we have to start looking at this and try to be adults in the room, Mr. Speaker. And the motion that the Conservatives have brought forward, and again, I'll remind people, they are filibustering their own motion right now. The motion is to bring this matter to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, which, you know, is a very, very important committee. That committee not only determines the membership of other standing committees, but it deals with all of these really, really important issues, because if the House is at an impasse, it falls to that committee to deliberate and find a way forward. And if we were to arrive at a space where we could send this motion, again, a Conservative motion that they brought forward and which they are filibustering, if we could find some way to bring this to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee so that that committee then could deliberate on the way forward, then it would allow this House of Commons to get back to the business of debating the issues that matter to Canadians. Now, there are a few things I want to raise, because I have listened to Conservative speech after Conservative speech after Conservative speech on this matter, and it is unclear exactly which way or what details they're looking for. Because on the one hand, there are major problems with how this funding was allocated. The Auditor General has observed that. The committee in its investigation has observed that. There were obviously major problems. Were they criminal? That is not for me to say. Obviously, there was some gross mishandling of taxpayer dollars, and people absolutely need to be held accountable for that. But it's not up to us to determine whether this is a criminal matter. That falls on the independence of the RCMP and also our criminal prosecution services. They are the only ones who can decide whether this proceeds in a criminal way. And there have been some arguments back and forth on, you know, is the House of Commons within its right to hand these documents over to the RCMP, or would that constitute an interference into an independent investigation? Again, this is not a question for which I or the House as a collectivity is best equipped to answer. I have repeatedly asked Conservative MPs after their speeches, because there is this uncertainty about what role the RCMP should play in this, would it not be best to refer this to the PROC Committee, Procedure and House Affairs, call the Commissioner of the RCMP forward as a witness, and provide and get best guidance from the top RCMP official in the land? I take this very seriously, because two of the standing committees I serve on, both Public Safety and Justice, I can say that I have dealt with this subject matter quite a bit, and I have a lot of respect for the work that our police do. So again, in an effort to find a reasonable and adult way forward, could we not just break this impasse to find a way for the RCMP to appear that committee, find a way forward, and if the Procedure and House Affairs Committee recommends a path forward, well then, if the House is still not satisfied, we can again continue this privileged debate. But I think it is sincerely unfair for more than 2 months now to hold up the business of the House debating this now very frivolous motion. And I would lay the blame equally on both the Conservatives and the Liberals. They have obviously been unable to find a way forward. So what I would say, Mr. Speaker, is you know, a lot of the Conservative speeches these days seem to have to fit several criteria as set out by their leader. They have to be full of hyperbole, they have to fit on a bumper sticker, and often they have to rhyme. So I think we are lowering the quality of the debate that could be had in this place. I don't think this House as a whole is rising up to the expectations that Canadians have at this moment. And again, over the last 2.5 months, all I have been witness from both the Liberals and the Conservatives is them pointing to each other saying, well, we weren't as bad as you were while in government. You know, to borrow from Tommy Douglas's fable on Mouseland, it's like the mice are being asked to choose between the blue cats and the red cats. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, they're both cats and they're both bad for mice. It is not a good situation that we're in. You know, we are in a crisis right now for cost of living. I think I would much rather spend my time in this House, Mr. Speaker, talking about how over the last 40 years of Conservative and Liberal government, we have developed a culture in Ottawa that is full of corporate deference. We have seen our corporate tax rate slashed to one of the lowest in the G7. We have seen policies enacted by both Liberals and Conservatives that have allowed the mergers and acquisitions to result in the concentrated corporate power we see in so many of our sectors right now, whether it's telecommunications, grocery retail, even in oil and gas. And so we keep on hearing these arguments saying, well, the Liberals will say, no, you know, we have done so much. Look at what we have done. Why are Canadians not happy with what we're done? Well, they are obviously missing the mark. They are out of tune. They are led by someone who I once described as radioactive. And I hope the Liberals understand they're not going anywhere with the current Prime Minister as their leader. But the Conservatives are not doing any better because, again, those bumper sticker slogans full of hyperbole and rhyming, that is just cheapening the debate. I don't see a very real offer coming from them, especially when their leader is fighting against a system that he has been a member of parliament of for quite some time now. He was first elected in this place, Mr. Speaker, in 2004.
Wow.
Now I'm the same age as the leader of the Conservatives, so you know when he first got here, he was 25 years old. At that time, I was out in the wilds of British Columbia, breaking my back as a tree planter. But for him to fight against the system that he is so clearly a part of and offer himself as something new is a complete and total joke.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just face it, like he gets his politics from the time when he was Stephen Harper's favorite attack dog. And I'll tell you this, Mr. Speaker, it is people like him who actually inspired me to run in this place, because I remember when I first saw the leader of the opposition on TV, and I could not believe that you could elect someone who was so arrogant, so full of spite, and so just downright nasty. And it's quite obvious from the antics that he displays here and now, he has not changed his ways. And so I will always be inspired to run against that kind of politics. And I will be inspired to run against the politics of the Liberals who believe they are God's given gift to Canada, and why can't everyone just be happy with the incredible work they're doing? The Liberals have let people down. They are not doing enough. The Conservatives are going to bring in the exact same types of policies that the Harper government got tossed out of office with in 2015, and that is a fact. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is for the Conservatives to stand here and talk about affordability issues when we know that the leader of the Conservative Party, when he starts his fundraising circuit, well, he's already been doing it, they are going to be frequented by the exact same corporate executives who are jacking up prices everywhere and taking in Canadians' hard-earned money. I think many Canadians would agree with me that billionaires do not need more relief. The working class does. And yet, again, because of the corporate deference policies that we have seen from these two parties over 40 years, we are at a stage now which is the natural result of those policies. Number one, many corporate sectors have seen record profits. Number two, those record profits are happening at a time when Canadians are suffering. It's not a hard stretch of the imagination to link the fact that in 2023, the corporate retail sector, grocery retail, combined, and this is 5 companies that control 80% of the market, saw profits of over $6 billion. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we have a record number of Canadians having to visit the food bank. The math is simple here, Mr. Speaker. I would agree with my friends that I would rather see dollars in the pockets of my constituents. But the problem is it's not the government removing those dollars, it is corporate profits. Yeah. More and more of their net income is being spent on the essentials of life, on heating, on fuel, on transportation, on housing, on food. That's not the government's fault. That's the corporations who have been unfairly jacking up prices. They are acting like a vacuum cleaner, sucking out the hard-earned net dollars of my constituents to pad CEO bonuses, stock buybacks, dividend payouts. It is a system that needs to be changed. It needs a wholesale cleanup. And we cannot trust the two parties that have built this system.
That's right.
It is not New Democrats, it's not the Green Party, it's not the Bloc Québécois. It is Liberal and Conservative federal governments trading places, and Canadians need to realize that these two parties, at their core, are but two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They may quibble over the big partisan talking points of the day, but these two parties are two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They fundamentally believe in that neoliberal economic policy, which over the last 40 years, especially since the greed of the 1980s, has led to deregulation, mergers, acquisitions, and unrivaled corporate power that has put Canadians in the economic situation that they are in today.
That's right.
Now, I want to talk briefly, Mr. Speaker, about some of the other things that have been held up. And I'll be personal here. I have a private member's bill, Bill C-277. It was voted on unanimously by this House of Commons at second reading in May. It sailed through the Standing Committee on Health, some minor amendments, but again, unanimously adopted by the Standing Committee on Health, reported back to this House. It is being held up by this filibuster. There are even good Conservative bills that are being held up by this filibuster, some of their own legislation.
Good bills?
And there's some good bills from the government, which again, in those rare occurrences, you can find all-party agreement. But again, we are in a situation now where it's being held up. But for my particular bill, the brain injury community has been without hope for a long time, Mr. Speaker. And this bill, my bill, C-277, is designed to set up a national strategy on brain injuries. I've had compliments from Conservative MPs, from Liberal MPs, across the political spectrum. They have told me that this is a good bill, this is what's needed. The brain injury community's hopes are being dashed right now because of this filibuster. Just last week, I sought unanimous consent because of the support that this bill has to see it reported, go through report stage, through third reading and sent off to the Senate. That was denied by the Conservatives. So again, I have been trying to find ways where we can get good legislation through this impasse. But we're at a stage right now, this last week of sitting, where the partisan emotions are so high that we're unable to see past each other's talking points, especially the Liberals and the Conservatives, to find a way to let good legislation go through it. And I think that is not only shame on us as an institution, but it is shameful for Canadians who I think with these moments, with the new incoming Trump administration, with the way Canadians are falling behind in the cost of living crisis, with what we are going to do with the future of our foreign policy. It's a dangerous world out there. It's not good for Canadians within our borders. And we're stuck in this stasis field of continuous filibustering, and the House is not living up to the expectations that Canadians have. So, Mr. Speaker, I would just urge my fellow parliamentarians, if you need to, reach for the spirit of Christmas. But we need to find a way to break this impasse. We need to find a way to live up to the expectations that our constituents have. And again, I'll conclude with this. I fully agree with the unfettered right of the House of Commons to send for papers. The Liberals have some explaining to do. They need to answer why they are not releasing all of those documents, why some of those documents were redacted. But I am not going to absolve the Conservatives of responsibility on this either. They are the ones who are putting up speaker after speaker after speaker. They are the ones who are preventing us from voting on their motion